Clara lived a solitary existence, her small house perched precariously on the very edge of town, where the streetlights surrendered to the encroaching darkness of the woods. It was a quiet life, one she had chosen, but the solitude became a fragile vessel on stormy nights. When the wind howled like a grieving beast and rain lashed against the panes, she was not entirely alone. A figure would appear, a strange and unsettling shadow standing just outside her window, a stark silhouette against the tumultuous sky. It was tall and impossibly thin, a sliver of pure blackness that seemed to drink the meager light. After it vanished with the passing squall, it always left a calling card, a set of cold, wet handprints pressed against the glass, fingers long and skeletal, as if reaching for her from the other side. Clara, a woman of logic and reason, tried to dismiss it. It was a trick of the light, she told herself, a branch contorted by the storm, her own overwrought imagination painting monsters in the night. But her reassurances felt hollow, thin as the glass that separated her from the entity outside. With each successive storm, the shadow grew bolder. Her attempts at self-deception crumbled as the evidence mounted. The handprints were always there in the morning, stark and undeniable until the sun evaporated them. The figure was no longer content to remain at a distance. It began a slow, inexorable advance. One night, she saw it by the kitchen window as she washed her dishes. Another, it was a fleeting darkness glimpsed in the chrome of the toaster. The shadow appeared closer each time, its presence more invasive, its gaze more intent. It started watching her not just through the windows, but through any reflective surface she happened to pass. A flicker in the darkened screen of her television, a brief distortion in the mirror above her mantelpiece, a warped figure in a spoonful of soup. It was everywhere and nowhere, a constant, silent observer in her isolated world. The feeling of being watched became a physical weight upon her shoulders, a persistent chill that no blanket could warm. Her home, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a cage, and she was the main attraction in a one-person zoo with an audience of one persistent, terrifying phantom. She began to dread the setting of the sun and pray for clear, cloudless skies, a desperate plea against the inevitable return of the storm and the shadow it brought with it. The breaking point arrived on a night when the storm was more ferocious than any she had ever witnessed. The house groaned under the assault of the wind, and the rain hammered against the roof like a frantic drumming. Clara sat huddled in her living room, a single lamp casting a small, trembling circle of light around her armchair. She had tried to ignore the windows, to focus on the book in her lap, but the feeling was too strong to deny. She could sense it, a pressure against the very air in the room. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slowly lifted her gaze to the large picture window. There it was, no longer a distant silhouette, but pressed right against the glass, its featureless face inches from her own. The handprints were already forming, condensation spreading from 5 chilling points of contact. A strangled cry escaped her lips. This was not her imagination. This was real. Fueled by a surge of desperate adrenaline, she decided she had to confront it, to prove to herself that it was just a play of shadows. She flicked on the main overhead light, flooding the room with a harsh, sterile brightness, hoping to banish the specter with illumination. But as the room lit up, her blood ran cold. The shadow outside the window was gone. She scanned the rain-swept yard, finding nothing. A wave of relief, fragile and fleeting, washed over her. Maybe the light had scared it away. She turned back from the window, and her breath caught in her throat. The light had indeed banished the shadow from outside, but it had revealed something far more terrifying. In the reflection on the now dark window pane, the shadow was standing right behind her. A primal scream tore from her throat, raw and filled with terror. She didn't dare to look over her shoulder. She just ran. Panic gave her speed she didn't know she possessed, her feet pounding on the wooden floors as she fled the living room. She slammed the door behind her and scrambled for the lock, her trembling fingers fumbling with the bolt. She raced into the hallway, then careened into the kitchen, her mind a whirlwind of pure, unadulterated fear. But there was no escape. She glanced at the polished surface of the refrigerator, and its reflection stared back at her, a dark, elongated form superimposed over her own terrified face. She stumbled backward, crashing into the dining table, and fled again, this time up the stairs to her bedroom. She slammed the door, her back pressing against the wood as if she could hold the entity at bay with her own body. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a weapon, for an escape, for any semblance of safety. Her gaze fell upon the vanity mirror on her dresser. It was there. The shadow stood beside her reflection, a patient, silent companion in her terror. It was then that a horrifying realization dawned on her, a truth so chilling it froze the scream in her lungs. The shadow didn't need the darkness to hide. It didn't need the light to be seen. It was not a creature of light or dark. It simply was. No matter where she ran, no matter what room she hid in, the shadow was always there, a constant in every reflection, a parasite latched onto her very perception. It was as if it didn't need to physically follow her. It existed in her sight, a ghost in her own machine. In that final, horrifying moment, trapped in her own bedroom, surrounded by mirrors that all showed the same ghastly truth, Clara finally stopped running. Her energy was spent, her hope extinguished. She stood motionless before her vanity, staring at the reflection of the shadow standing just behind her, its form wavering like heat haze. It was no longer just watching, it was closing in. Slowly, deliberately, the reflection of the shadow reached out. It didn't touch her reflection, it moved into it, its dark essence flowing like ink into water, merging seamlessly with her own mirrored image. Clara felt a coldness spread through her, a deep, invasive ice that started in her spine and radiated outward, extinguishing the frantic fire of her fear and leaving only a hollow emptiness. Her eyes, reflected in the glass, widened for a moment, and then the light within them simply went out. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening in the morning sun. Her neighbors, concerned after hearing a scream the night before, peered into her window. They found Clara standing there, perfectly still, her back to the room. She was gazing out at the bright new day, but her eyes were vacant, her expression utterly blank. From that night on, the house on the edge of town gained a new legend. On clear days and stormy nights alike, those who dared to look closely at the windows would see it. A faint, dark shape standing just inside the glass, a shadow within the reflection, motionless and patient, as if waiting for the next curious gaze to meet its own. A sinister allure, a chilling fascination.